Angela D. Brooks, Philadelphia's first Chief Housing and Urban Development Officer. She oversees the city's ambitious plan to build or repair tens of thousands of homes through the H.O.M.E initiative.
The thought of working with a mayor who's hyper-focused on housing, and more importantly, housing supply, and ensuring that affordability is a part of that was really exciting. We really are trying to think about how do we remove a lot of internal barriers that we have within any bureaucratic government, because in this country, wealth building is still mostly done through property. The vision for home is...
Joining us for the afternoon keynote is Angela D. Brooks, Philadelphia's first Chief Housing and Urban Development Officer. She oversees the city's ambitious plan to build or repair tens of thousands of homes through the H.O.M.E initiative. Angela has held leadership roles in housing across Chicago and is a nationally respected voice on equitable housing policy. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Angela Brooks, Chief Housing and Urban Development Officer for the City of Philadelphia.
Okay, we're going to start things off with a question I always ask people on the podcast. Tell me your story. How did you get to Philadelphia?
A plane. No, seriously. I was coming off of being president of the American Planning Association, and a lot of work we did over my 2 years being president of APA was around housing supply, partnering with the NLC. And so when this job became available, I wasn't necessarily looking to move, but the thought of working with a mayor who's hyper-focused on housing, and more importantly, housing supply, and ensuring that affordability is a part of that was really exciting, because I'm originally from Seattle and I can't afford to breathe in Seattle, let alone live there. And so the opportunity to work with a mayor who's truly focused on preserving affordability for residents was like a dream job for me.
Perfect. So here we go. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty here. Go ahead.
Yes. The city is very lucky to have you, so I'm glad you said yes, because the planning brain is really, I think, necessary when we talk a lot about these housing initiatives. So we're going to talk about H.O.M.E.
Yep.
That's a big plan, obviously. I think we're looking to know, what's your role there? How are you optimizing the program? What's the vision from your perspective?
I think all of us are still trying to figure out what my role is and how I fit in. I describe it as I'm homeless, and that I live in the mayor's office, technically, but I sit between our planning department, specifically our Department of Housing and Community Development, and our nonprofit partner that does a lot of the implementation, which is the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, and I'm chair of the Land Bank Board. So I say I just insert myself in everybody's business, but ultimately, there's really H.O.M.E, the vision for H.O.M.E is a whole lot of things. One of them, obviously, is the 30,000 units, preserving 16,500, producing 13,500. But also making the city work better. And so we're doing a lot of stuff. And actually, Daniel earlier, when he was talking about a lot of the operational stuff that we need to do around zoning reform, but also infrastructure reform. So we really are trying to think about how do we remove a lot of the kind of internal barriers that we have within any bureaucratic government that really is a barrier to really getting housing supply completed and done, which, as we all know, I'm a recovering developer, adds to cost and certainly the time, and I'm hyper-focused on 30,000 units getting done. So that's the vision, but really, I think the most exciting thing is really looking at what are the code reforms that really help get housing done, and what is the internal infrastructure we need to work on to make the government work better.
Okay, and then you mentioned the land bank. So how does the land bank fit into all this with the H.O.M.E initiative?
Yeah, so we just completed an operational assessment for the land bank, and for those of you, hopefully everybody in this audience is familiar with the Philadelphia Land Bank that was created in 2013, I believe. Most city and city agency-owned land flows through the Philadelphia Land Bank. We've got probably part of the H.O.M.E initiative. It's $800 million of bonds, which we will be closing on later in March. But we're also looking at about $1 billion of city property, making that available for development of housing. And so the land bank is a huge partner in that, because most of that land flows through the land bank, and has been one of the biggest kind of ways to make that process go quicker. At least initially, that's the thought. And so doing the assessment to really think about how we can make that operate better has been a huge kind of initiative as step one to getting that to be an efficient. They're doing great work, but we just identified some of the policies and procedures we need to implement to make that flow a little bit quicker.
Okay, so you want to?
Our next question has to do with the rental improvement fund.
Yes.
So many housing providers are still learning about it. What is the program designed to accomplish?
I think somebody earlier asked how many small landlords were in here, so this is really for you. And the Rental Improvement Fund really provides a forgivable zero-interest loan to small landlords to make repairs to units that are affordable. And I wrote this down so I don't get it wrong, so I'm going to read my notes. So we've got our minor loan product, and that's loans from $10,000 to just under $25,000 per property. The loan term is 10 years. The forgiveness schedule is basically the loan will be forgiven 20% annually beginning in year 6 if conditions are met. And the interest rate is 6% if the affordability requirements aren't met. And then there's a moderate loan program that is the amounts from $25,000 to $100,000 depending on the size of the residence. That's a loan term of 15 years. And that has a forgiveness schedule very similar. It's forgiven 10% annually beginning in year 6 if the conditions are met. And so the interest rates for that one is also 6% if affordability requirements are not met. And for underwriting, the project rental incomes must cover the existing debt payments and other property-related costs. And so if you're interested in that program, that is facilitated by the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, so definitely reach out to PHDC. But it really is a great program that can ensure that our units that our residents are living in aren't just affordable because they're in deplorable conditions. So a huge part of the HOME initiative is not only producing, but it's also preserving and making sure that we are giving quality housing to people who need it most.
Are you thinking about buying, refinancing, or investing in real estate? I've been a loan officer for 30 years, helping my clients find the right loan for the right property. I keep it simple and honest. If you want real numbers and guidance you can trust, give me a call. Now let's get back to the show.
Okay, and I just want to expand on that because a lot of people just may not have heard. We're talking about up to $25,000 on one specific program here, that if you're a small landlord, you can put a new heater, new roof, new windows. And as long as it's not how much money you make as a landlord, it's you rent a one bedroom for, let's say, $1,300. So the rents are pretty generous that you have, and the whole thing is improving stock. So if I can turn around and fix a couple of my houses with Philadelphia's money, sign me up. I'm all in it, and everybody here should be talking about this program because it's tremendous.
It's a great, tremendous program, particularly for people who have naturally occurring affordable housing, and that is a lot of the smaller landlords. When I think about throughout my career, the best partners in creating affordable landlords weren't the big corporations, it were the mom and pop shops who may or may not have the money to keep up the property, and so giving them the tools to ensure that they, one, are able to keep the property in great shape, but also have a legacy to pass on to their children, because in this country, wealth building is still mostly done through property, right. At least for smaller folks who weren't born with a trust fund.
Zoning and permit reforms. That's been, I believe, approved in December. I'm not 100% sure the dates on that, but what does that look like?
Yeah, so part of the HOME plan is looking at a series of zoning reforms. So we had Tier 1, which were some of the kind of, I would say, the low-hanging fruit, a lot of kind of like corrective measures in the code, a few kind of housing ones, but we, in the next couple of weeks, will be doing the Tier 2 zoning reform bills, which will be around, I think we talked about this earlier, transit-oriented development. So really looking at how we can expand some of the perimeters around that, as well as a few other housing ones. And so those bills should be transmitted by mid-March. We're also in budget season, so trying to think about when it doesn't get lost in the fray of budget negotiations. But there's going to be about 5 tiers of different bills that'll be around zoning reform. But more importantly, I think that gets lost in a lot of this stuff is about this time last year, Mayor Parker did a executive order which tasked about 26 departments to really think about what are the barriers that exist within your particular office that is creating a barrier for housing. And so as we're moving forward with that, we're looking at a whole lot of different things that can really help move housing a little bit faster and more efficiently. And I think it's more than a campaign slogan for Mayor Parker to be a government you can see, touch, and feel, but also making sure it's one that works for the residents. And so there are a lot of reforms around that, and we're doing, I think one of the ones you're talking about is probably the 5-day review in terms of L&I, and so that's just L&I, but we're looking at the other departments that also touch permitting, so that's really exciting. Again, I'm a former developer, so I have lots of personal experience with that, so I can relate to many of you in that room, and I also sat on the Chicago Zoning Board of Appeals, and so I think we'll talk about this a little later too, so we're looking at we've done some really great work on the ZBA as well to get decisions out faster.
That's great. I love hearing about it. I think zoning change really has proven across the country to really be a catalyst for a lot of this housing. The transit-oriented housing is so smart. So I was thinking about the 5 business days and cutting timelines and red tape, and we're in budget season, and all these things are swirling around, and sometimes it's hard to get off of that, and I know that I'm jumping around here. But as far as the terms of accountability, right, I think you touch on so many different areas of the government, which I think is a great measure of accountability. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's probably the thing that we think about the most. And so one of the biggest things around transparency and accountability that we've been working on is the Philly Stat 360 page. So if you go to Philly Stat 360, that's where we're putting out pretty much everything. So you'll be able to see the status of both spending on home, but also the units of home, but other departments as well. And so you as a resident of Philadelphia or someone doing business here can go to that site and get the data, I would say at least quarterly, sometimes monthly, it just depends because there's some stuff we have to do on the technology piece, but really making sure that we're reporting out consistently. And on home specifically, the city council and the legislation, we have to do quarterly reports to city council, so there's a level of accountability that's there. And one of the things we've been doing just as a planning department, which I don't sit in, but I sit adjacent to, is we've been working with Bloomberg, and so they've been doing a lot of work around ZBA specifically. And maybe a year and a half ago, if you went to ZBA, it might take you 2 to 3 months to get a decision, and now we've cut that time down to 2 weeks. And so we're seeing a lot of efficiencies and working with a lot of these folks who are doing stuff across the country to help really bring things to a quicker kind of solution and getting those decisions out, as well as the budget from last year approved a lot more staffing, because staffing capacity is real. I don't know who tells people that government workers don't work, because I have not found a time where I'm just lollygagging at 3 o'clock yet, and I'm looking forward to that, being that government worker. It just doesn't exist. But ensuring that we have the staffing to really implement some of these aggressive housing goals that we want to meet, and being really responsive to the needs of Philadelphia residents.
Yeah, and that's huge, because if I own a property, I'm paying a mortgage on that property, and it's taken me 6 months to a year to get my approvals in place. Time's money, so that is super
money.
important.
With the supply chain, we can't afford to be dragging that out. Yes.
Okay, so there's talks about One Philly Home Mortgage Program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, and you're probably familiar with it because we're basing it off of One Mass Mortgage, so we're really literally taking that program. So essentially, One Philly Mortgage Program, and we are not starting a public bank here in Philadelphia, because that's the first question I get. We are not competing with any banks. We will be working collaboratively with banks. But essentially, this is a loan program that the city will be producing or providing a loan loss reserves to help mitigate risk. We are still working to determine the parameters, but the things that we want to do most is, one, buy down interest rates, permanently buy down interest rates for borrowers, as well as get a lower credit score than is traditionally underwritten. So I think Massachusetts is 630, I think. So just looking at what is it we have to provide to banks to manually underwrite to get mortgages to people who statistically have been proven can pay mortgages but probably wouldn't get otherwise underwritten. And when you partner that with our Philly First Home, which is down payment assistance out there, really looking to create home ownership opportunities for a wider breadth of Philadelphia residents. Philadelphia has a high home ownership rate percentage compared to other cities in the region, really in the country, and we want to ensure that we not only keep that, but we sustain the kinds of people who are able to get into houses at a wider breadth than normally are getting there.
The credit thing is such an important conversation because you think about, could be medical bills, it could be something from forever ago, so that's such an important part of the program. What type of outcomes, I guess, are we hoping for with this program? Is it working together with other housing counselors and?
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this because I know Kenneth and Abraham are in the room, but Philadelphia has a really robust, great housing counseling system. And so specifically One Philly Mortgage, we've been meeting with the housing counseling agencies, and we still have lots of talking, so Abraham and Kenneth, do not kill me, but we want to do both pre-counseling and post-counseling because we're also introducing home ownership to individuals who may not come from anybody in their family owning homes. And as all of you all know, there's a lot that happens post-closing that people may or may not be prepared for. So the HOME initiative is really a collaborative process. We have a home advisory board, which when I first started, I was looking for Ashton Kutcher, because I felt like I was going to be on the show Punked, because they gave me 50 people to be on this home advisory committee, and all are from different segments of housing, all of whom are passionate about what they do, but not really passionate about working together. So it's been a really interesting kind of room to be in, to have some really tough conversations about housing and about the direction that we're going. And so it's been a great experience in hindsight, because we're having a lot of the conversations before we put things on the street. So hopefully we're addressing a lot of the concerns of pretty much every segment. So we're looking to collaborate with and not take away from the work people are already doing. So we've got like a facade improvement program. So we already know that there are organizations out there doing substantial rehab. How do we partner with them to expand their reach? And how do we deploy public funds in areas that are seeing private investment, but we're making sure we're not leaving anyone behind? So we might have a neighborhood where you see some amazing turn the key homes going up, but there's some older homes that need a little love. And so we want to make sure that we're doing touch points so whole communities are feeling the benefit of, we're asking residents to borrow $800 million. That's a huge ask. It's the largest ask we've done specifically for housing as a city. So we want to make sure all of the residents of Philadelphia are seeing the benefits throughout their communities.
Okay, and then with the mortgage, do you have any idea of when that's going to roll out, or when that's going to get finalized?
No. I will say, I know when the mayor wants it to roll out for sure, and that's tomorrow. So all of the home programs, so essentially we will have bond funding on or around April 1st. So we have to finalize all the legalities, particularly for One Philly Mortgage, and signing all of the documents and getting through that. But it is the mayor's legacy and her baby, so it's probably my number one priority. So while I can't say an exact date, I can say as soon as absolutely possible, and looking with a lot of our partners, getting banks on board. And since there are probably banks in this room, just saying that it's going to be like a rolling application. Whoever wants to participate can. I think when we talked to Massachusetts earlier the week, they have 25 banks that participate. So it's not going to be some long, drawn-out RFP process to participate. It's going to be like, hey, these are the terms. If you're willing to do it, you can participate.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and I know the mayor's talked about a 20-year tax abatement for vacant properties and distressed properties. And perfect example would be maybe like the Watermaker building that is empty, and it's a beautiful building. It's not too distressed. It's actually nice.
It is, actually.
But where's that at? And I know it's just being talked about right now.
So the Commonwealth did step one. So the Commonwealth did the authorization language statewide. And so Philadelphia City Council will have to adopt it as well. And specifically for those of you who have not been following it, it's essentially an abatement for the conversion of commercial and industrial property to residential. And I'm reading it because I got my legal terms because I don't want to get in trouble. So City Council needs to adopt an abatement law pursuant to the state's authorization legislation for it to become implementable. So I'm not sure what the timing is going to be for that, or even how controversial it'll be, but I think there's a lot of opportunity as we start thinking about, me specifically, 30,000 units and what's quicker. There's a lot of beautiful older buildings here, and we're seeing it across the nation in terms of rehab and repurposing and adaptive reuse, and it's a very quick win because a lot of these buildings are in great condition, so it wouldn't take as long to turn those into some type of housing units. So we're really excited to be thinking through that, and so the next steps for that are just working with the different council members on thinking about what that legislation looks like and a timeline for that.
That's great. We've heard about some programs that we don't really know when they're coming out, but what are some you could talk about from home that are on the horizon that maybe we don't know about?
So we've got, I think it's, I don't even remember, it's 40 different programs. A lot are existing, some are new. So we're starting with 5 programs, year one. So we talked about One Philly Mortgage. I mentioned the facade improvement program. So many of you might be familiar with the commercial program. This will be residential, so from tuck pointing, or just think anything on the outside of the actual house. Then we'll have our curbside appeal program, which is, think from the door to the curb. So it could be planters, could be tree lighting, could be some minimal sidewalk work. We've also got a shallow rent program that'll be rental subsidies for, think about it on a workforce kind of thing. How do we help people who, we have a residency requirement for a lot of these kind of public jobs. How do we help people stay in the city? So we'll work through that. We've got a home concierge program we're trying to figure out, and we know that a lot of people, one of the biggest issues they have is finding a contractor. So what is a program that we can help residents find support for their contracting needs? Because that can be very intimidating for somebody who might be a newer homeowner. So we're working through that. So those are some of the big ones. And I think the big thing that came up a lot during council is the basic systems repair program and the adaptive mod. Those are existing programs, but we'll be expanding them. Both are capped right now at 60% of the area median income, but adaptive mod is being expanded to 80% of the area median income, and basic systems repair is going up to 100% of the area median income. Council legislation has capped for the home bond funds. Only 10% of the home bond can be allocated to families over 60% AMI, but it's still a huge step because, as I'm sure all of that, just because somebody makes 90% of the area median income doesn't mean they have the funds to maintain their homes, and we're looking at neighborhood blight and supporting that. We've got to be a part of the solution for folks in a wider sector of the income. So we are really looking at our housing plan to address the full housing continuum, and that's a big step toward that.
Okay, and Pennsylvania, Governor Shapiro, they just recently passed their housing program. So how will these two programs work in sync, or how can you collaborate?
Yeah, if you, and I imagine most of you won't actually nerd out and read all of both of them, but they are very similar and complementary. Really excited. We had a briefing with the governor's staff before it was released, and there's a lot of overlap in things like organizations like Built to Last, basic systems repair. That's a huge focal point. But they're also, and you guys talked about it earlier on panels, a lot of it will be those statewide kind of recommendations of zoning reform. So we've seen that in some states, and as an urban planner, I will never suggest that statewide preemption is what I'm suggesting. I'm not, but suggesting some sample zoning ordinances or providing funding to support technical assistance for communities that are looking at that are amazing. So I think they're complementary plans. We're really excited to see that some of the things that we've started in our own housing plan ended up in the state plan as well, and so we're going to take credit for being a leader on some of that.
So they copied off of you.
Yeah. But no, we look forward to working with Governor Shapiro and his team. They've been really great in working with us as we've rolled out our plan. And then we've also been very fortunate that the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency has representatives in our home advisory board. So we have a really great relationship with the state, and we're looking forward to working with them. Obviously, our focus is the city of Philadelphia, but seeing the regional impact they're able to have now that we have this statewide housing action plan. Because while I'm obviously very focused on Philadelphia, it's great to know that there's going to be support to the surrounding communities as well.
Did you have any other questions, or?
No, the state and city alignment is so good, and my community benefited from state-funded technical help, which is so important.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah, we're really lucky here in Philadelphia. We have staff, but everybody doesn't. And so being able to have a state partner and have a governor also focused on housing is amazing. So the timing is great for everybody in this room to really think about how do we work together to move the needle on both housing supply, but ensuring every resident has a safe, affordable place to live. So I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you guys for the work you're doing, having this conference and these conversations, because they're so important.